Okay. I would like to call to order that Wednesday, May 11th meeting of 2016 of Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission. I'd like to start, we have a new commission member, so I'd like to start by having everybody go around the table and introduce yourself, but I'll start by introducing John Freeland and let him tell us just a little bit about himself.
Okay.
Do the last name.
Freeland.
Freeland. Cool.
Yeah.
As in free land,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my name's John. I'm a realtor here in town. I ran for city council recently. You all may recall that. I serve on the Moscow City Commission for Fair and Affordable Housing in addition to this one. And I'm an ambassador for the Chamber of Commerce. I'm very involved in politics in the community, but we'll leave that at that. So I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you and getting good work done for the city of Moscow. So thank you so much.
Welcome. Joel, you want to...
I'm Joel Hamilton. I've been a member of this commission since, I think, 1981.
Wow.
And I also serve on the Moscow Transportation Commission, sort of as a liaison between the two. I've been occasional chair and occasional vice chair of this commission. Currently, I'm vice chair.
Very cool.
I'm retired from the College of Agriculture, University of Idaho. My passions are gardening and wild mushroom collecting.
Cool. That's great. That's great.
I'm Rob Parrish. I'm a multiple retiree, Foreign Service, more recently the airport, Pullman Moscow Regional Airport, Moscow Pullman Regional
Yes.
Airport. I am now getting to be the old hand here on the commission. I used to be the new guy, but now with John and Dennis, I guess I've been around for about a year and a half. So look forward to working with you, John.
We know each other, staff liaison
we do,
to the
indeed.
commission. Yeah.
Cool.
Catherine, you want to introduce yourself back there?
Catherine Maza, the city council member.
She's our liaison,
Good
council
deal.
liaison.
Good
Yeah.
deal. Yes.
I'm David Rock. I'm not on the P&Z Commission, but I am a guest, and you'll hear me speak a bit
From the
later
tree.
on.
From the tree commission.
From the Tree Commission,
Very
yes.
cool.
Chair of the Tree Commission for a long time, and just a member at the moment. But
Awesome.
my forte is urban tree care. So
Very cool.
yeah.
And I'm Nels Rees. I'm a retired professor, been in architecture. So I've enjoyed being on the Planning and Zoning Commission these last 20 years. I don't brag about it because Joel, it's hard to beat Joel in terms of longevity, but just the way land is used and the way our communities grow is a particular interest to me, so I've enjoyed that. I also am on the Historic Preservation Commission, and I don't water 40% of my land.
There you go.
Got it.
Well, I'm Dennis Wilson. I'm a new one too, like Rob was saying. I'm been here 5 months, I guess. So I'm still learning a bunch, and I appreciate all you guys, and you will too. It's been fun so far. I'm a local business owner, local property owner, a dad, husband, coaching baseball, football, basketball. I'm on the Bear Booster Board, Moscow Baseball Association Board. But this is all I do for the city so far, so I'm not privy to the rest of these commissions, so we'll see. But welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm Wendy McClure, chair at the moment of this commission, and also chair of the Moscow Historic Preservation Commission. With Nels as the vice chair, and he's been chair of that, and then he forgot to mention that. I'm professor emeritus from the architecture program at U of I, and have a small practice in architecture with an office in a building on Main Street, and trying to get that launched.
That's great.
So,
That's great.
Longtime resident of Moscow. So,
Good deal.
yeah. So, anyway, I guess we're ready to roll. So we can move on to the approval of the minutes of April 27th. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions? Everybody have a chance to review them? And I can't find my notes.
I move their acceptance.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, so, they're right in front of me, of course. Moving on to correspondence. Mike, I noticed one addition in the packet. Wasn't the letter that we've already discussed. It was another one. Let's see. It was, I thought I did. Maybe not. Anyway, I guess I'll defer to you. Are there any?
None from staff. It was probably the maybe the letter, the public comment for the hearing.
Yes, that was the one I was looking for. Right. And do we need to bring that into this discussion at all, or is that just
that
for the
was just
record?
That was just for the record.
Okay. So I'm learning some of the procedures myself
I
still.
hear
In terms
Good
of, okay, great. So moving on, Transportation Commission meeting report. Joel brings us that.
The last meeting of the Transportation Commission was a month ago, and I discussed that meeting at our previous meeting of this commission. The Transportation Commission will meet tomorrow afternoon from 4 to 6 in this room. The agenda includes a discussion of a possible complete streets policy. Obviously, this commission has, in general, been very adamant about adhering to complete streets principles in what we do. However, the city does not have a complete streets policy.
Oh, interesting.
And the proposal is to develop a complete streets policy. It could be useful for various things, perhaps grant applications and so on. So that's a major item that we'll be discussing tomorrow. We'll also be discussing the possibility of a bicycle tourism campaign. We've done a lot of work on developing the bicycle thoroughfares through and around the city, and bicycle tourism is a thing that is probably worthwhile considering for the city. Last item on our agenda for tomorrow is intersection mobility standards. I'm not quite sure what all that's going to involve, but we'll see. Do you know any more about that?
Not sure.
Yeah.
Intersection, meaning for cars to move or people to move?
Well, my
bicycles to move,
my
or all of the
suspicion
above?
is, I'm assuming it's talking about crosswalks and curb cuts and bump outs and various things that improve the mobility of intersections, but we'll see.
Interesting. Okay, thank you, Joel. So the next item on the agenda is open microphone, and it's an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the commission regarding matters not on the agenda or currently pending before planning and zoning. And I don't know, is there anyone, we have two members of we have one member of the audience. And do you want to get up and speak? No, I didn't think so. So at any rate, just to remind people who might be listening that this is an opportunity to come down and talk to City Hall and talk to us in this window of opportunity. So. Okay, so we move on to the approval of relevant criteria and standards, and Mike's going to present several of those to us. And
just have the comp plan designation as well as the rezone in your packet today, and so it was just, presented for approval before the commission, and I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have. We also have the rezone that got forwarded to the county, so we just need to finalize that before the whole packet goes up to them for our recommendation. So,
Did you run into any sticking points as you were putting these two together?
no, I didn't. No. Yeah, these are some of the, I guess, the first couple that we've done with our new criteria. So,
Oh, okay.
not the county one, but the annexate, the comp plan and
Right.
zoning designation. So.
So I've got a procedural question. Can we do both the comp plan and the rezone in one motion? Or does it
Yeah.
have to be, it can be one motion?
Mhm.
So I move to approve the rezone, or the comp plan change and the rezone for the 30 acres. Do you need any more detail on that?
Second?
Second. Okay, Dennis, second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries, and we have approved the comprehensive plan, land use designation and zoning designation. Let's see, so the next one would be the rezone of the 20,500 acre lot on Highway 95.
Wasn't that included?
No.
Oh, I thought we
No,
just
so the first,
passed.
the
Okay.
first one, which is the 30-acre property east of Mountain View
Right.
Park, is actually a two-part piece.
Oh, okay, I thought we
And,
just
yeah.
approved.
So some of it was
Oh.
for, yeah, so
Okay.
that's what. So now we're looking at
Okay.
the
Mm-hmm.
Highway 95 piece. Is there a motion to approve that, or discussion, or anything?
Make a motion to approve it.
Oh,
Second, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, let John have his first
Okay.
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, abstentions? Okay, we've approved the rezone of the, the relevant criteria and standards for the rezone of the Highway 95 piece. Okay, off-street parking landscaping requirements, and this is a discussion, and Mike's going to make a presentation.
Cool.
So this is just continuing on our discussion from last time. We gave you some homework middle of last week to go out and take a look at a few parking lots around town that have been developed to our current landscaping standards. And invited David Rock from the Tree Commission to come and talk about, give his expert opinion on some of the plantings and maybe to answer your questions about, widths and whether or not, mortality rates of certain trees and shrubs within, varying widths of islands and spaces and things like that. And so feel free to jump in anytime, David, and give us your opinion. But
How about if I just, if I say, if you can tell me what our goal is before we watch this, like, is the goal to collect the water, is the goal to get rid of the water, is the goal to provide shade, or what exactly are we trying to do? Are we trying to get it aesthetically looking nice?
yeah, it's pretty much to break up the barren feel of a parking lot, kind of to do all those things.
Just so we're looking for aesthetics then?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
it's partly aesthetics, it's partly urban heat island effect, partly providing shade to cars and people that used cars, filter stormwater, filter the air with trees and shrubs and other plantings, provide stormwater filtration, all those things from, the increased runoff of impervious surface and then increased contamination from automobiles on top of that surface,
So all the
it's kind of all
stormwater,
those
where does
things.
it go up in the drains? Where does it end up at?
Stormwater, if the area is over 5,000 square feet of impervious surface, which almost all parking lots tend to be of this size, goes to catch basins And so it's you'll see it like a square drain in the middle of parking lots.
Yeah.
Usually, drains to that. It'll actually catch in that basin, and then it'll be contained there. And then there's a couple of orifices, like pipes that come in on either side, and they're of a certain level. So the stormwater goes in there, and then it collects, and then it slowly disperses it down into the system, so it doesn't increase the runoff. So if we were just, not doing a stormwater catch basin, and we were just shooting all the stormwater directly into the system, well, it could cause downstream effects that may be detrimental to other properties. And so that's why it's contained on site and then slowly dispersed into the system, so it doesn't increase the total rate that's going through our stormwater system.
Now, what's the system? When you say system, what exactly is that?
Just network of storm pipes. Actually, Paradise Creek is our main stormwater.
So it could end up flooding if everybody didn't have a catch basin. It would end up flooding.
Yeah, you have.
During hard rain,
Yeah.
it would flood Paradise Creek, which
Yeah.
has happened before.
Yeah.
We're under some obligation to the feds, aren't we, in terms of, at least in terms of treatment of runoff?
Yeah, we have those obligations right now, but there'll be more stringent standards coming down. I think it's EPA Phase 2 requirements that'll require all parking lots to filter stormwater, as well as our own public streets. So any type of erosion, sediment that gets into the stormwater system, we can be fined because of that.
So in a sense, we're looking ahead with regulations also.
Yeah, thinking about the stormwater requirements, we'd be, just anticipating that those are coming forward. And they give us these, and Public Works is largely in charge of this, but they'll give us these dates where we need to have certain earmarks done, or benchmarks done. And they keep on extending it out and give us more time to work on it. But yeah, it'll all be coming down from the federal government.
So in essence, all our rainwater is pretty much ending up in the Paradise Creek eventually, slowly but surely, right?
Yeah,
Of
some of it,
surface.
some of it
Yeah.
ends up getting absorbed into the ground
Sure.
and recharges the aquifer. But yeah,
Sure.
a large portion of it ends up in Paradise Creek.
Okay.
And because of, the more you pave, the more it ends up
More ends
in
up there, yeah.
whatever river or creek that you have.
That makes it.
And whether, kind of depends on who's downstream and whether they're fishing in it, and so there are a lot of more pristine things in Paradise Creek probably.
Sure.
But I think we all fall into that same vision of trying to not just put our oil.
Yeah.
Well, and some jurisdictions have gone to actually 100% site water capture, meaning you can't disperse off the site. And you have to find a way to percolate back in the ground, and that's why there's been a push for bioswales in parking lots and things like that, because they
Yeah, looking
allow
at
that.
Jan's, and that looked perfect to me.
Natural.
Spot on.
But it's a good question, and it really shows that this is a multifaceted, multidimensional. We have lots of goals to go with this, not just a singular.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably expand upon it. But when this section was initially inserted in the zoning code, which is probably in the 90s. Since 99 is about the last time our code's been updated, but they always typically provide purpose statements at the beginning of sections. So our landscape requirements section for parking lots, the purpose that they had down at the time was that the landscape requirements is to promote attractive off-street vehicular parking areas in the city, to promote traffic safety, and to protect and improve appearance, character, and value of the surrounding neighborhoods, and thereby promote the general welfare. This objective is to be accomplished by providing noise and visual buffers between parking areas and adjoining land uses, and by providing landscaping in the interior of parking lots, thus providing visual relief from the barren appearance of large areas of parking surface. So, there's quite a few more things that you could point to
Sure.
that it does, but, that originally in the
No, that-
90s, that's what...
That sums it up. That's good.
Would it be appropriate, based on his question, to get David to give us just an overview of urban forestry in terms of what we're looking for in terms of trees? Or do you have a better?
Well,
that's
I think we'll listen to your presentation. I did take some notes tried to think of all the, my focus was on how landscaping, how the design will affect maintenance. And so that was my focus. And so tree species selection, size of the islands, those kinds of things, among others that I have listed in the short version here. I can talk about those kinds of things.
Okay.
And I'm not a landscape architect or a designer, so I can't really go into a lot of design elements, but a lot of how the things are designed do affect the maintenance and the cost, basically. So I can help you with those kinds of things. But yeah, to answer your question, when I was looking at this subject, I came up with the two functions, two goals of landscaping lots, aesthetics and some functionality with stormwater retention and shading. You know, one visit to a large discount retailer up in Spokane really hit home with me on this. It was the parking lot, very large islands, you know, landscaping, trees, and it was, you know, the parking lot was maybe 20% filled with cars, large lot, hot August, and believe it or not, I wish I had a camera with me at the time, but clusters of cars parked underneath each tree, with spaces of unparked space between, and it was just quite a vivid shot. And if I could have just taken a photo of that, I could prove or show people, here's one value of trees.
To echo that, I was visiting Portland this weekend, and Happy Valley, which is a new, sort of new urbanist, new kind of extension of Portland to the south. And same thing. It was a hot day in Portland, and they had bigger trees. And then the code must have, or either the mall owner or the city, whatever, must have decided that another layer of trees was necessary because there were more established ones, and then they had infilled with smaller ones. But in every case, all the cars were jamming around.
Sure.
You know, it's certainly it has been proven in many studies that retail frequency by customers is directly related to how much shade there is in a parking lot in hot climates in the summertime. So, you know, the people are more willing to go out and shop.
I'd like to ask a question about that with respect. I love where you can go and park under a tree, particularly in the summertime, but I really dislike when I get home and my car is covered with whatever else comes out from bugs or dropping it. So are there species that we can recommend that don't irritate the car owners so much that...
Great question. That's one of the things I've listed. And I'll just, maybe as we go along, I'll throw some things out, or at the end I can go over the list. But yeah, the species selection is very important. And the traits I chose for the best parking lot tree would be, one, cold hardy, take our temperatures, cold temperatures, and structurally sound architecture. Sounds like a big term for a simple tree, but there are some trees that you can buy in nurseries that are prone to splitting as they get a little larger in size, you know, and so you can have some damage to property, perhaps to people. So you stay away from those. Heat tolerance. Low litter, you don't want to have a tree that just drops all kinds of large fruit, like, you know, a simple example would be an apple tree, of course. But there's other shade trees that have nuisance type of litter, so I always just not try to plant those. So insect disease resistance. The lindens, the small leaf lindens from Europe are planted a lot in urban landscapes. We have some downtown, we have some on campus, and just every one has these aphids. And these, they're very problematic, and they produce the little sticky windshield. They put their little proboscis, little mouth part in the phloem stream, of the leaf. It's high pressure inside there in the spring, and it just shoots through their little nose, through their body, quickly out the other ends. They're able to grab some of that nutrition, but a lot of it goes out and onto your windshield. So avoid those trees. Absolutely. Good question. So, and then disease resistance. There's some problems with some diseases that are some killers, and they'll just wipe out. So drought tolerance could be an issue. Diversity. Gone, I think, are the days when large, long avenues, parking lots with all these islands are planted with one species of tree, the monoculture. We have a lot of invasive insects and diseases from Asia, Europe, making their way across and causing devastation to some of our native trees and otherwise non-natives. So you would lose all your investment, your resource in one shot if an epidemic came through, and we've had examples of that in history. Dutch elm disease is one. You may all be familiar with the white bark birch trees in town. Half of them, or the top half, are usually dead. The bottom half are still hanging in there from an insect. That's been a problem. So yeah, watch out for that. So diversity, maybe 3 or 5 species within this area instead of just that one. I know landscape architects like that uniformity, but we've got to find a middle ground, I think, on that. And then the last characteristic would be form of the tree. You want to avoid trees that are with sight, where sight vision is important, looking around the corner when you're driving around these islands. You want to avoid small trees with low spreading hanging branches that get maybe 25 feet or less in size at maturity. They're always going to be a maintenance headache. Try to prune them up to make them look maybe, like a lollipop. But more importantly, they're going to prevent vision obstruction. So you want to avoid those. So there's different forms of trees that produce more upright shapes and different sizes. So long answer to your insect question, but so, yeah, so those are things to consider.
I remember when Elm Street, in the town I grew up in, every elm tree on the street died from Dutch elm disease, and it was really sad.
So the species list, then, with looking at these characteristics I mentioned, that would, you have this list this long. If you try to follow to the T all these characteristics, your list is going to go about like that on selection. So we try to go a little bit further out and deal with some of these problems that are tolerable, but yet widen our selection. Otherwise, you may have like this 5 trees. So,
Thanks.
And that's already implemented, isn't it? From what I've seen driving around today, it looked like there was different trees in the parking lots.
I think folks
Already.
are trying to, in the newer lots,
Yeah.
are trying to do some of that. There are
Yeah.
many that aren't still. It's
Oh, really?
still a thing that's trying to, it's a trend we're trying to promote heavily with a lot of changes happening. So, yeah.
So this is looking at Sherry's and Applebee's development here. And this would be our standard 3-foot wide landscape buffer with up against the public right-of-way. And usually what happens is you have the 3-foot landscape buffer that's on private property, and then you have this the area between the back edge of the sidewalk and that 3-foot area. And this is an approximate property line. It should be centered on Warbonnet, and so it's probably pretty close to the eastern edge of these shrubs right there. But that's almost always what you end up with, is that they end up just landscaping. They'll put the shrubs in and then just end up putting some bark or river rock all the way up to the back edge of the sidewalk. So you end up with a buffer that's quite a bit bigger than the standard 3-foot buffer that we require just on private property. And so within that area, we require 2-foot tall shrubs every 6 feet centered in the 3-foot wide buffer. And then once you get above 50 stalls in your parking lot, which both I think Sherry's and Applebee's are somewhere around 60. So they've had to divide some of these larger areas into bays. And our code is a little poorly worded as far as direction. as to whether or not you have these bays at the end of or you have the islands at the end of the bays, or running down the middle. And so, if for instance, Walmart has the ones that are going directly down the middle. Our experiences with those is that it's hard to do snow removal, at certain times a year if you have the way running right down the middle.
I have a question about I was thinking about that in the sense that these are perpendicular to the store, and if you did one down the middle, the walkway wouldn't take you to the store. But at Walmart, the walkways of them going down the middle take you, as a pedestrian, or can take you towards the store. So to some degree, it really depends on the configuration of the building to the parking lot, don't you think?
I agree, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then within the, we have a ratio of one parking lot tree to every 10 stalls, and so they probably were required to provide around 6 trees, and they've chosen to put, I think, all of them in these islands. There's about 2 per island there.
So why don't you have trees like going on the side right there? Why don't you require trees
Along here?
Yeah.
Well, that's a question. I mean, we just give the developer the flexibility of choosing wherever they want to put them, instead of a lot of other, we were looking at our chart that I handed out. A lot of the other jurisdictions require shrubs, and then they also require maybe a tree every 35, 40 feet type of thing. And so when you start to look at, parking lot looks pretty good when you go out there and it's had 5 years to grow.
Yeah, Applebee's
it doesn't.
parking lots look really,
it looks
really
good.
Yeah.
And but I think that one thing that you need here is a couple trees thrown in there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And so that that would probably
because
be
all those parking places all the way up through there they'll never be shaded.
Yeah. So I think that the 3-foot wide buffer, just because of almost always you have this distance between the sidewalk and that, it creates a larger buffer. I think the 3-foot works fine right now. It's just the inclusion of maybe some trees within that area. So, maybe it's the 2-foot tall shrubs every 6 feet on center, and then we have 1 tree every 35, 40 feet type of thing.
Yeah.
Just to give some direction as to where we want those trees on the exterior.
And to follow up, Wendy, I think the owners of these properties and these businesses, they want folks driving by to see their business. So they want to have view sheds, open, and rightfully so. But I think in this, a few trees every 45 feet or so would still allow those big, large windows,
Right.
and yet still, and then make it look maybe a
Yeah.
little more aesthetically pleasing, and along with all the other benefits trees provide. Sure.
Comment. These parking lots, I think, are reasonably handsome and work, it seems to me. But I feel like that little island would be more effective if it was about perhaps 2 feet wider, just enough to, I worry about the tree getting enough water if you don't have a watering system. And it just seems to me like it was a sense I had that I would be, admittedly, by the time you widen every one a couple of feet, you might end up dropping a couple of spaces. So I realize that's a balance, but I just felt these are a little bit too tiny. Just a feeling if there was some way, somehow, an ordinance should be broad enough to allow designers and owners to make decisions on their own, I think, without absolutely telling them what to do, but should give some good guidance. And my only criticism of these 2 parking lots was that little narrow thing. It just seemed like it was not
Well,
quite
I would
enough.
agree with you. So the 3 feet includes the curbs on either side. So then all of a sudden you're down to a pretty narrow slot for the tree to gather nutrients and everything else. And so that plays into the question of your list of tree selection. You're probably not recommending trees that we would grow in our street trees because they can get really tall and their roots have room to spread and most of the tree lawns. I mean, these parking lot trees, I mean, what's their maximum lifespan? What are we looking at? You know, are we looking at a tree that caps out at 20 feet, or, you know, and how much room do they need? And I know it probably depends on the species, but I agree with Nels. I looked at that and I went, how's that tree going to survive another 5 years? You know,
There are some guidelines to follow on trees planted in hardscapes, be it along a city street, like a downtown area, or in plazas. And the worst scenario is for the trees to be planted in little 4 by 4 foot squares with pavement between. A better scenario would be to connect those 4 foot spaces, connect them with soil. So you have a long soil strip. These trees can share the soil volume, the roots can, which is helpful for the tree's longevity, health, plus more soil volume is always helpful for a medium to large size shade tree. So I also agree. These are too narrow. You know, it's going to be like a potted plant, and these trees will have a much shorter lifespan in that environment than if you widen that, you know, by a couple more feet, or more would even be better. It's an investment you make, and you know, down the road, in a short amount of time, these trees will suffer. Aesthetically, they'll look poor. Functionally, they'll be doing less work, and then you'll have to replace them. The cost of that is, you know, expensive. So there are other design features of parking lots that take into account larger soil volumes, but not taking up any more space, square footage, within that footprint of the lot. One way is to cluster plant trees. So have maybe reconfigure these narrow, long strips into maybe squares. My experience is a little bit low on how those will fit into a parking lot design and how they provide enough shade as far as, you know, they won't be spread out like these strips, but the trees will live longer, be healthier, and actually the crowns will be wider, and maybe the spacing of the cars will be the same as long strips provide. So a thing to look at, maybe an LA who might help with this perhaps later can see how those larger and fewer islands can fit into a lot design. But if you do go with the strips, yeah, I think wider is better. Michael's matrix he put together showed, I think some communities have 8 foot.
Yeah,
wide.
majority, you know, it kind of ranges.
Yeah.
Some are, I think the minimum we've seen is 6 feet in width, and then they range, you know, 6 to 8 to 10.
So I would say an 8 foot wide strip, inside curved, crossed, would be ideal. And that would be probably a very appropriate amount of soil space, rooting space, water and such, to accommodate.
What are you saying, 8 foot wide?
8 foot wide, right.
And how do you balance that? I agree with you, I like the
Yeah.
wider, but how do you balance that then with the number of parking slots that
Right.
we're going to require? Because you're going to,
Right.
in this instance, you would lose probably, what, another 3 or 4 stalls?
So,
Maybe
yeah, so the
4 or
point
6
was
stalls.
try to increase the size of the islands, but have fewer of them. So the square footage would theoretically stay the same, but yet you provide us environment for longer growing, healthier trees that can get larger crowns and
So
shading.
go back to the other slide, Mike, go back to the plan. Yeah, so are you suggesting then that if you did a fat one here and a fat one down there, then maybe give up that one in the middle?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it's a trade-off, but that is a way to allow these large plants to grow healthier, larger in size. The average age of
like
it.
that little one on the
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
the average age of a downtown metropolitan shade tree is 7 years. That's the average age. 7 years because of the tough environment, growing conditions, and abuse and such. Luckily, we have a nice scenario downtown on Main Street and the side streets there where those trees are growing far past that, which I think was good.
Those are 30 now.
Yeah, so good job on the design of those.
But look at Fort Russell. I mean, I realize that we can't just compare commercial and residential, but I'm going to say the trees in Fort Russell are pretty much 60 years old, do you think? Mm-hmm. And you see, as they get bigger, of course, they start to lift your sidewalk. And that's another reason because what's going to happen in these things, if the tree did survive, it's going to break that curb. Mm-hmm. So that's an issue, as we've seen it in even in up and down Fort Russell. I'm sure there are plenty of people who have had to think about new sidewalk because the tree just raises the sidewalk a bit. But so that's seemed like another argument for using, if you had this fortune like on Warbonnet, to put like 3 or 4 trees in there, you would get a nice feel. But that's a nice width of dirt there.
Yeah.
You could also on this shot here, there's 3 islands in the middle, top, middle, and bottom. Perhaps with my magic wand, I would take the right-hand side of each of those 3 islands and just wrap it around to connect lengthwise with its partner on the opposite side to create a little wider rectangle. And you'd have, and then maybe shift those 3 a little bit to the center, perhaps, or leave it where they're at. But you would still then have wider planting space. You'd have 3 islands instead of the 2, and they would, be more dispersed instead of just a couple here or there. Did you follow how that would work?
I think I lost you on that.
Okay, I lost myself on that. Simply take this piece and wrap it around to here.
Oh, okay.
And it would be like this.
Oh, okay, so you take up a full parking space and
Right,
then
same
open the
square
other.
footage, correct? If we did that to this one and that one as
Right,
well.
gotcha, and
You'd
stagger it.
widen this, and you'd
Yeah.
have 3 islands, as you do still now, but they'd be wider, accommodate a little bigger tree perhaps, and longer growth.
So you could kind of stagger so it's more like a half island on each
Half an
one instead
island,
of a
sure.
long
Yeah.
one going across.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at those other jurisdictions, about half of them just give a total square footage.
Yeah.
So maybe it's
Right.
30 square
Right.
feet that each individual island has to be, and maybe they have a minimum width on there too. So
Yeah, yeah.
that would give a little bit of
One
flexibility.
of the dilemmas that we've got, and I don't know if we can find places in Spokane that have been planted for years, but we let the mall get off scot-free in 77 or whenever we built it. So there's not a tree in sight except along the highway, and they're growing nicely along the highway, though as I recall we had some arguments about those trees, didn't we? And once again it was, could you see the mall?
Right.
They're worried about being missed. But what we don't have in the mall, with a lot, had we been smarter and required some trees, we would have some 40-year-old trees to see how they did in 40 years. But no, we didn't. And so the mall is conspicuous by its ugliness.
Emptiness.
As far as parking is concerned.
Trees.
It's a beautiful place to walk, of course.
So yeah, this is just further south of the Applebee's lot. Actually, when I went out there, it's funny you mentioned that because I think all the cars were either grouped around the trees or as close to the front door as possible. So it's a little bit different type of tree. These are a little bit older than the Sherry's development since Applebee's was put in quite a few years earlier in that. But same thing, 3-foot wide landscape islands here, a couple trees per island, another couple different types of trees.
So, Michael, on this slide, you can see the term ornamental tree is we use it and in the industry, and it's usually a small flowering tree, 25 feet or less in height, low branching by form, by natural growth habit. So the burgundy-leaved trees are purple leaf plums. They're an ornamental. They're you can see that one has been raised. The lower branches repetitively been removed to provide space for a vehicle. High maintenance, so we try not to plant those smaller ornamentals in the interior where they'll be adjacent to spaces. Trees in the foreground have a more upright form, more appropriate, maybe not as much shade because they don't spread out as much, but a little taller growing and a little more appropriate, less maintenance. But that tree in the back, kind of has been deformed a bit, with a lot of attention to it. So,
It's interesting, go
there.
back again. If you look across the street at the trees, we're not looking at that as a parking lot, but Walmart seemed to put in some pretty good-sized trees over there, or maybe they've had them ever since.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was in their parking lot and their trees are not growing in the parking lot. Yeah, they look good.
There they are, but not in the parking lot.
No, and it doesn't look like they're going to be shade there forever. So I was going to ask you, is that water or is that the trees or what is
I
that?
think it's
Because Applebee's, which was later.
Well, no, Walmart's actually, it was developed
Very new.
earlier, but they did the big remodel and they tore out all the trees.
Oh,
I think
okay.
they were,
Okay.
so that's relatively new. That's probably 2-3 years old
Okay.
since
That
they
makes
planted
sense.
those
I
trees.
think when they redid,
Yeah.
you realize we were closed for a while with
Yeah.
Walmart. Thought we were going to
Okay.
lose Walmart, and then they remodeled it and brought us each on Walmart
And they
from both
saved-
Denver
That
and
makes sense,
Moscow.
Yeah, and then they saved a lot of these evergreen trees here that were at the entrance.
But
They
those
had
across
saved
the street
those.
are going to get pretty big. They're going to be pretty
Well, that's why I was so
interesting.
confused. I just didn't get why they were
Yeah,
so small.
no, they. It was. I think their landscape. Somebody in corporate, their landscape architect said that. I don't know if they were reconfiguring it that much, but it was just that they weren't going to be able to
Save them.
save the trees. Yeah.
and the specs should say, they may very well, evergreen trees and evergreen shrubs that get taller than, say, 36 inches are appropriate for that exterior buffers. But interior and at entrances where you're looking left and right to move around in the lanes, no evergreens.
Too dense.
Yeah, really dense.
36 inches or higher because of the low branching from those spruce and fir and pine and all that. So,
That's a good point.
yeah.
So one question I have that I always heard as a rule of thumb from landscape architects when I was teaching is that the tree canopy kind of defines the perimeter of the root gathering. I mean, if a tree's canopy is wide, the base that it needs to gather nutrients is going to be pretty much the same size. Is that true? Or?
Not somewhat.
Okay.
The root system can grow shallow and wide on most all trees, and it's usually, if you take the radius from the trunk to the drip line, multiply that times, say, 2 or 3, that's the extent of the root system, how wide it can grow. And very shallow, maybe the top 12, 10 inches, sometimes 8 inches of the soil is where most of the roots grow, the fibrous roots.
Really?
So, but there is a term we use called a critical root zone. And that's if there's excavation or trenching around a large shade tree or a tree, you try to avoid damaging that critical root zone. It's usually, for an average shade tree, it would be inside the drip line just a little bit. So
What's a drip line? What are you saying there?
the ends of the branches, as you know, you got
Okay.
the branches hanging out, so
Where you can stay dry
stay dry.
when you're camping out.
Exactly.
How far do the roots go under asphalt?
Yeah, so new asphalt, new concrete, very little, but older asphalt, older pavement can have some micro cracks or things where actually water, oxygen, gases can exchange with the soil a bit. And you'd be surprised, there will be some roots that can grow under that. But that's the exception. The rule is generally the roots will be pot bound within that little narrow strip. And
So the roots go where the moisture is.
the roots won't seek out the moisture per se. Moisture has to come to the tip of the root, and then that root will grow into it. They have no radar saying, "Oh, there's water over there." But yeah, so they're pot bound, and the bigger the pot we can make, the better, I think.
But once again, that just seems too narrow for me. I'm
I
really
agree, yeah.
not happy with that, and I can't believe that if we couldn't get that space from inside edge to inside edge of the curb to be 4 or 5 feet, that would be, I would feel so much better with it.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just another view of that 3-foot buffer, but it's grown up, pretty substantially since they were first planted. So it actually goes above the 2 to 3 foot, that we're looking for with perimeter shrub. But then again, no trees in this area either.
It is nice how, in the last slide, it's the the vegetation has grown over the gravel. I was really bothered by the amount of stones everywhere because talking about an urban heat island effect, they're like an oven. They're going to store heat and radiate it. And it seemed to be prolific. That was the main ground cover in almost everywhere. And ground covers are not that, they spread pretty well, and you can get drought tolerant ones. And I don't understand why we don't have that layer in there too, and allowing so much stone. And I think it would help the trees.
Do you think that's legitimate in given our 21 inches of rain? Could we make a requirement for ground covers rather than always seeing gravel? Do you think? I realize it isn't a tree. I'm making you grovel a little bit with ground cover.
Are you asking?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You.
Sure, you can have all three. You can have ground covers, they grow about this tall and they spread wide. Can be woody or non-woody. Most popular one you see are junipers.
Junipers are everywhere.
That grow,
Yeah.
some grow this tall but 8 feet wide. Okay. You can have shrubs, middle layer. Shrubs on the interior should be no taller than 36 inches in height at maturity. There's a problem in a lot of parking lots where the shrubs, for whatever reason, the landscape architect spec'd out shrubs that will get taller than that. And there's a major problem with sight vision going around these islands.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to remove them on the corners or constantly rejuvenate them down the ground and grow up. So you can have, so you can have all three: ground cover, shrubs, and trees. The ground covers, may be overtaken by the shrubs eventually, or vice versa. So you got to space them appropriately, but there's certainly room.
I've
Yeah.
been learning a little bit more about ground covers just recently with trying to do some ground covers in the Meridian Strip on 3rd and Hayes, but I found out, I don't want to insult any commercial folks, but the university sells at the Pitkin out at the farm, they sell thousands, hundreds of things, and like ground covers, you can get a good bargain, so it wouldn't be so difficult for a person to put in ground covers if, I mean, the difference for me to buy one over here at $4.50 a little ground cover, and over here $1.50, that's a lot of difference. And so there are ways that the city could even, city and university might support this urban forest in the sense that those things are, I don't think people, at least I didn't seem to know you could just run out there and buy plants, but I found out that they have quite a list of plant materials if you buy them at the right time. They're not every moment of the year, but it's an interesting opportunity.
You know, it just occurred to me, I had a chat with Nicole Baker the other day, and is there an opportunity here to kind of combine some Y-scape, that's, I guess, the city's term now for xeriscape, but Y-scape landscaping to some of the criteria that we're talking about for parking lot maintenance, and you talk about what kinds of things are drought tolerant, and there's a lot of things that after maybe 2 or 3 years hardly need to be watered at all if you do it right. I'd love to have Nicole come and talk to us about when we're formulating some of this criteria, about what things we might be able to suggest that would kind of incorporate all of this stuff, just exactly like what you're talking about with the ground cover. Just a thought.
Maybe a certain percent of the landscaping devoted to Y-scaping. Sure. I just wanted to stress again, there's two major problems. What I see with design and how it affects us, and with maintenance, with parking lots. One is the shrubs are planted, and if you look at the literature, the reference material for that particular cultivar of that species that was planted, you'll see it matures at 48 inches. And I think 36 inches is the highest we'd like to go, where you can see over. And it's, I think, a requirement for site triangles in town. So that's really an important thing, is to make sure the mature shrub doesn't reach that.
Right, I noticed a lot of barberries, for example, and they get tall.
Oh,
They
yeah.
do dwarf.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
or dwarf that. Well, the dwarf might get 6 feet tall. And the species where the dwarf came from maybe gets 12. So dwarf is, so you have to be careful. And the other thing, you may be touching on it, but it's really hidden in the design, is lighting. In construction documents, the lighting plan is on page 100, and the planting plan is on page 7.
They don't.
They never,
Never talk to each other.
rarely, I should say, rarely come together, and someone views that and coordinates where the lights are and where the trees are planted. So you'll end up with a tree growing maybe 5 to 6 feet from a light pole. And the light
There's
pole
an
is...
example of that in
Yeah,
the
there
picture
there
before
was,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Couple of
In
Yeah.
front of Sherry's, yeah.
So
Right there.
if it's a medium to large growing shade tree, that crown, sooner or later, if it survives, will just block out a very good portion of that light pattern. And so you have to go in and just really destroy the crown of the tree, remove the tree. We never remove the lights. It's always the tree that gets worked on. And it's just a high maintenance. And then 3 years later, you have to do the same thing, and it's just a mess. So I recommend 25 feet distance between any light and any tree.
That's
If
about
it-
what Walmart did.
If it's a large
growing.
growing, medium to large size stature tree, so that would be in the 35, 50, 60 foot height. Just street lights along streets the same way with trees, but parking lots. So shrub height and those two plans have someone look at those and compare and try to.
So you would be critical of that one right there as an
Absolutely,
example?
yes, yep. Those upright columnar trees most likely will interfere with the lights, if not already.
Well, yeah, that's just silly right there.
Yeah. So it's,
Put one right in between two trees.
and again, those plans never seem to come together. And when this lot is installed, the trees are only maybe 5 feet tall at the time, 6 feet, and the lights are 35, and it's like, oh, no problem, until later. So those two.
Good point, yeah.
Okay, so looking at Walmart, like you mentioned, Wendy, it's kind of got the division into bays where there are these long linear at the front of each stall. So these are all, and they vary in width. Most of them probably are between 3 to 4 feet, and then you have some of the larger ones that are adjacent to the pedestrian walkways. But these were really required as part of our large retail ordinance. And they also have a stormwater swale here that doesn't really have any vegetation. It's just river rock on the south side there.
That was pretty distressing.
These are looking at some of the wider landscape islands.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit wider than the ones we just looked at.
Yeah,
My sensation, I think, can't keep track. How long has it been since Walmart reopened? We talking
Probably
six
3
years?
Nah,
Three?
like 3 years. Maybe.
So see, these trees are really brand fresh and new. I think in another decade they'll.
The shrubs are doing pretty well. I remember when they first put them in, they were pretty small, and then these have grown, probably tripled.
They definitely are getting bigger. So
So now, is that a sidewalk right there? That's not a sidewalk, is it?
No, it's just the curbing. So I think they made the stalls shorter, and usually you have a wheel stop, and then you've got a little bit of distance. What they did was just pour a continuous curb, and then just had this for overhang. So usually you account for about 2 feet of vehicle overhang when the wheel comes up to the curb, and that's what they're accounting
Oh,
for.
Why?
you want that concreted too, then?
No, this is
Because that's a lot
probably
more.
about the only example I've seen where they've done that.
That's a
And-
lot
and
more.
concrete. Yeah,
You'd think they would have just made the planting strip a little
Little bit
wider,
wider.
and not
Yeah.
worried about that.
that's what I'm
Because
saying.
I don't think you'd have to be a lithe person to want to walk on that with cars sticking out on it. So it doesn't.
But the other one you just flipped to was a sidewalk, right?
it
Yeah,
is.
that's
yeah,
a real.
Yeah.
They did that twice across the parking lot, and that's pretty thoughtful.
Yeah, I mean,
Except it only needs one side. I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it needs.
I preferred, when I saw the one in Oregon that I was talking about, it was,
Had the
the
sidewalk.
landscaping was where the sidewalk is, and the
Yeah.
sidewalk was where the landscaping is, and so
Yeah.
it just had a nicer feeling. It was much more green.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that better too.
Seems like it'd be cheaper to run the concrete up the middle
Right.
instead
Yeah,
of both,
right, exactly.
double on the sides. Did see a duck in there. The water was not looking
No ducklings?
that fresh though. Then we looked at Fairfield and kind of University Crossing building, which is this building right here. Fairfield's pretty recent. They ended up just doing River Rock. Ended up putting a couple trees within their landscape islands, but they've done instead of the one continuous, they've done a couple, and they're a little bit wider. Those are probably 6 feet wide there. Then you have these end islands that are pretty big as well.
So here's an example of this evergreen tree is, going to get larger. It's going to get wider, taller,
Yeah, it's
and
big,
low
isn't it?
branches will remain unless you want to make it look like a odd-shaped Disneyland tree.
Mushroom or something.
A mushroom, right. So very bad, I think, placement of an evergreen.
Well, going
at
around
this
that
spot.
corner, you know, your
Right.
sight distance is going to be blocked, or even somebody pulling out of
Yeah,
that
for
stall.
sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really good. The thing that makes this,
What not to do.
this development is greatly enhanced by the wall of green along the hill. I mean, I was shocked at how happy I seem to be with this development, with all the greenery along the hill there. They didn't plant, of course, that was just there. But it certainly makes you feel like, oh, this is okay.
You know, it was funny when I was looking at this, my eye went immediately to AutoZone lot, and I went, what happened there? You've got, they did what they could do. It's a fairly constrained area around the Fairfield Inn, but that big slab of concrete at AutoZone, was that, I mean, it just, there's no landscaping whatsoever.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing.
So, and that was fairly recent, wasn't it?
Buffer or nothing
Yeah.
on it.
What happened?
Well, I don't know if they met the 50-foot or the 50 stall threshold, so
Okay.
yeah. 'Cause you have a big area back here that's all loading and everything, so it's hard to tell. But
So that isn't counted in there.
Yeah, they
These lots,
didn't
okay.
meet the 50, so they weren't required to do any landscape islands.
It's just hard to
Gotta be
imagine
close, huh?
why that could have been a lot better. And as much as I go to the auto places, you never see them with 20 cars there. I mean, somehow there's every auto place in town you can park right in front of the door.
Yeah.
I mean, you go in and grab your battery and get the heck out.
Yeah.
And so I'm dumbfounded that they. I suppose it's just auto mentality, but that could have been a much more handsome lot, couldn't it?
Well, I think, because if that weren't considered, I think some of the other wider and more organically shaped, I kind of like some of the dividers. I wish it weren't rocks. I wish they had more diversity of planting.
Mhm.
They just put trees in the middle of rocks in most cases, but otherwise, I think if they're wider and they have a nice proportion to the ratio of the lot with the parking. So.
These little spaces seemed better in terms of shape. It was just that evergreen that was really a serious mistake.
That was.
Needs to be taken out, actually.
Right. This
Before it gets too big.
Yeah, this particular tree, it looks like it's an incense cedar, and they grow very pyramidal, somewhat narrow in form. So this one might be an appropriate evergreen for an interior kind of a space by a
Well,
lot.
that's a missed opportunity for a good shade tree too, isn't it?
Also, maybe a shade tree would have been preferable because of that reason. Sure. Like Walmart has that large banks, the large hillsides of evergreens planted. Great use of that type of a tree
Yeah.
for that space. And then within were deciduous trees in the lot. So some good design there, I think, on that. But yeah, and lawn, you have to water that a lot, mow it somehow, and the irrigation's going to surely spray over that polygon of lawn into the pavement somehow and waste water. So I'd avoid little irregularly shaped lawns. Wouldn't deal with turf unless you have a much larger area with, say, a seating area or picnic. And that's probably a good use there of lawn.
But that could have been
That's
a
a swale. It's a bioswale,
that
sure.
used
Sure.
Well,
native grasses.
Yeah, they're really
somewhere.
using it
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
semi-swale. They've got
Semi-swale.
the parking lot shed in this direction, and then they have these curb lines that ended up conveying the water into that area, and it serves as a swale.
But there's other types of vegetation that
There's a whole
that
different
enhance
plant
swales.
list.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
bioswales, the whole
Yeah.
different plant list with certain requirements, like a little more moist.
So when do you do a swell and not require a drain? Is it up to the individual, or what? What's
Well,
what is that?
we give the option of, or I should say, engineering department gives the option, because they have the requirement that once you get over like I mentioned, over 5,000 square feet of impervious, it has to be
Okay.
contained on site. But they have been, like this development, I don't think has catch basins in it. They just have these curb cuts here in the curbing that drains, and then they have some type of orifice. I know that there's a storm drain somewhere around there, and then they've got one over here where the engineering department allows them to do that, and that's how they kind of detain the water on site, and then it goes into the system.
Because it's less than the 50,000 feet?
No, it's over. It's just
is?
that they give flexibility as to they would prefer you to do a bioswale as opposed to just doing a catch basin, because it filters the stormwater runoff.
The oils from the car, the pavement and
Right.
such.
Yeah, you can see
yeah.
they do have a catch basin right there. Just another view of those curb drops.
So they have a catch basin and the swell, so both of them are like for overflow? Is that what that's for, or the drain?
Well, usually, they'll have in traditional swales. They usually have some type of orifice that comes up, and it'll fill up the water, and then it'll slowly, once it reaches a certain height. The problem with our soils is that we've got so much clay in the soil that you don't have a lot of percolation going on, and so the level of absorption into the ground isn't
Slow.
there,
Yeah.
and so we end up with standing water a lot of the time. But
Yeah,
so
if that
they-
standing water gets up so high, it'll go down this drain? Is that what that's for? Or?
The way usually, if they have a detention pond or things like that, they'll have a pipe comes up, and then they'll have a bunch of holes, and then it'll let it slowly drain out, type of thing.
Bioswales can be really problematic to maintain, though, and you have to be kind of careful about that because they do stay wet. Then the stuff grows. You can't get a mower in there, so if you've used some kind of grass or something, then the next thing you know, you've got all sorts of stuff growing up. You create a wetland, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's really difficult to maintain. So you kind of have to be careful about the way you construct these bioswales and the way you drain them out.
Yeah, see, their landscape islands there, probably that one's probably about 8 feet wide there, about the size of a stall. I also thought I'd point out the new ball fields there, the new parking lot that we've built as part of that development project. And this would be similar to Boise's, so I'll go through kind of just an overview of the chart. I won't go through a whole lot of detail, just kind of provide a summary. But Boise's requirement is that you have one island. I think it at least be 8 feet in width, one every 12 stalls. And so if you look at this, you count about 12 stalls and you see an island. So this would probably be an equivalent of when we compared and looked at Boise's, what their requirement is. Usually one tree per island. They would say that this is pretty much a double island because it encompasses 2 rows of stalls. They do, however, have looks like the same plantings in each of the islands. There's not, like David mentioned before, not a whole lot of diversity. But though that would be an example of an 8-foot wide island.
It seems to make better sense, don't you think? And you do feel like enough when the rain and snow, at least some water is going to get down to that tree.
The lighting is 20 feet away from the trees.
So very, very good, yeah. Glad to see that.
And then these are the conceptual kind of illustrations that we've done. I'll zoom in here a minute, but this is really the taking a look at the parking lot of what our current standards are. So we have the kind of division into bays. We've got the 3-foot wide landscape strip down the middle. We've also got the 3-foot wide exterior strip. This would be probably the Boise example where you have about every 12 stalls you have an island, and this would be pretty much an example. We have percentages down here, so if you recall from the chart, I think it's included in your packet today, that we've got, some municipalities choose to go percentages, so maybe it's 5% of the total maneuvering area for stalls, as well as travel lanes and driveways. They take a certain percentage of that, and then you have to have whatever that percentage is to be landscape islands. And so, this is about your 8% right there. And so looking at Lewiston's requirements, actually, when you get up to a number of stalls that is this high, 350 range, they require about 8 to 10%. So this would be kind of the Lewiston model, but this would be resembling what the Joseph Street ball fields, what that ended up turning out to be. So looking at our current, we come in at about 3.3% of interior landscaping. So if you were to look at that chart, that's pretty much at the bottom of the list as far as the level of percentage.
Mike, did these other configurations, like the Boise and Lewiston examples, present a direction of travel conflict as cars are coming in and out of those? I mean, there's no, with an angled slot, you kind of know which direction you're going, but with these, could you go to the other, okay, so you've really narrowed out to basically a single vehicle coming out between those landscape islands, but you could come in or go out of those either way. And knowing how people drive around here, they're going to be going both directions at the same time. So I guess maybe my question is, don't those configurations present traffic conflicts or direction of travel conflicts?
The way I view it is that it maybe just gives you more options. And so instead of, you're here, and instead of having to reverse back out and be directed just on these kind of external travel lanes around the site, you're able to, maybe go over to a shorter route, and it saves, you a little bit of trip distance type of thing. But I don't know that it's safety is that big of a concern as far as the location of the islands in the parking lot.
Well, and not so much a safety issue, because you're going to be traveling at really slow speeds, but what if somebody's pulling in one way and somebody just backs out and is coming down another way? Now you've got basically, unless I'm misreading how wide those aisles are between the stalls.
Well, because you have to have enough backup
they're 24.
space.
Yeah, they're
so
two-
you have two
they're-
lanes
you
of
get two
travel.
cars.
They're all
Okay.
they're all two-way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you look closer,
All right.
they're all 24 feet wide.
Okay.
Is our
Are
travel
you
aisle.
talking about the perpendicular parking as opposed to
Well, a
diagonal
little bit,
parking?
because
Is that the issue?
Well, I don't know that I care one way or the other, but if you could come in with them perpendicular, you could come into them either way. But I guess if those the widths between the parking stalls are enough to get two cars, then it really doesn't matter.
Well, because you have to have enough backup.
To back up and come around,
So
okay.
that pretty much
So
dictates that
it's not
usually they
really-
have arrows.
My concern is not valid.
I don't like the 3.3%, Michael. Let's go bigger.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's go wider with.
So yeah, we if you recall when we looked at them, some of them did the percentage, some of them did the about half and half. Some of them did the 1 per 12, 1 per 10 type of thing. So we did pretty much the 1 per 12. So this would be kind of the Boise example, and then we calculated the total percentage. And this is just not including the exterior. This is only just landscape islands. And we just took into consideration, or when we did the calculation, just the stalls, the travel lanes, and the driveways, going in and out. So that would be included. Came in to be about 6%, which is about what you see, kind of the average of some of the other municipalities. What their percentage.
Better,
And-
isn't it?
Huh?
That's better, huh?
Yeah, it's better. But then you think about the lights would the lights be on concrete pedestals away from the planting? With this, if you put the light pole in any of those planting areas, it would always mess up your concept, So I was just wondering if lights then go out here.
So that you can hit them when you, because I've done that in Rose Hours, it was like an explosion, because the bottom of those things, yeah, I did $3,000 worth of damage to my car going 2 miles an hour. Because it was raining, and if you're, I couldn't, it had a base that you couldn't see very well, and if nobody's in the space next to you, you can cut it was a nighttime and rain, but still, I worry about, from that experience, freestanding light.
How the ball fields at Moscow, the new parking lot, they have lights and trees, but spaced nicely?
Yeah, they where possible, they had put them on the exterior over here, but they did have some, here, but they still had kind of the spacing, so they didn't have a tree,
so
they had a light.
They replaced that tree with a light to avoid that conflict. So,
I didn't know they had parking lot lights.
Yeah, they're not very tall, they're probably only 20 feet tall, maybe.
Does that mean that this place can play ball at night?
No.
They're just on you can park.
That's what I'm saying.
You can
we
park
can't play ball
night.
at night, so I didn't even notice there were lights
Why
in the
would
park.
there be
I don't know.
lights? Because I thought they locked it up when they're not open.
I don't think so. I think it's supposed to be open to the public, but I know they did run conduit to locations on the field.
Hopefully someday.
So someday in the
Soon.
future, I'm sure that there'll be lights on the field. Just right now.
They were planning ahead with those, yeah. Planning ahead.
Be impatient.
So and then this would be, we wanted to see about what 8% would look like, and so.
So the
ended up-
8% is including everything on the bottom? Is that what bumps it up?
Yeah, well, I think we added some
No, those
islands.
are closer. Yeah,
Added some
more of it.
islands, so,
Bubble
added, I
island.
think took away this one and shifted it to here and there. So we added, instead of 3, there's 4.
Okay.
And then, added, increased the size of some of those.
So,
right
Wendy,
there at
were
the
you
bottom,
one of
so-
those people that wanted to drive just straight through the parking lot? You didn't want to back up and use the lane?
No, it wasn't quite like that. It was, I was parked right next to the light
Because
post.
I have a little, that's a debate between my wife and I. I always feel like you should just use the parking lot the way it was designed, even if you can go straight forward and go racing for the gate, across
No,
lanes
this
and stuff.
was not racing.
Just an interesting.
I was trying to get into the travel
I've
lane.
been known to go diagonally through a parking lot.
This,
There's nobody there.
This makes it a much less likely to take that diagonal.
Yeah.
Even at the Safeway, you find that occasional person that sees the gate over there and just taking that diagonal
No,
view
I wasn't trying to do
at the
that.
right time.
How many parking spaces in the previous? So when you go to that, there's 367.
Yep.
How many if you just do the 3-bay, where the 6%? So you're not even picking up 20 spaces.
Yeah, and then the 3. Actually, yeah, I mean, if you got away, actually, looks like we increased by about 30 by doing the.
3 versus the.
Yeah, instead of just the single 3-foot
Right,
wide.
right.
So now these have jumped up to, I think, 8 feet wide.
Okay,
So,
So when
just taking a look at that.
that's great.
So when you go to the 4, you're not any worse off. You're actually still better than what we have now.
Than what we have.
And to me, it gets the.
Yeah.
I was counting parking spaces between trees in this nice parking lot in Portland this weekend, and that's a lot closer to it. It's.
I'm assuming that either of these would be better than the current design in terms of snow removal.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yep. Yeah, I've heard those 3-foot wide continuous strips are real problematic in that regard.
Yeah, the snowplow can go racing through the parking lot.
Can't do it there either. But
Why is it problematic? What's the problem about it?
Well,
Like I said, or-
it's just when you have cars parked there, and then there's
Oh, yeah,
no
yeah,
place to
park,
put
yeah.
the snow. I mean, it really becomes a problem. These, you can kind of, just go across multiple bays and plow it that
Go
way.
around cars.
it's okay. It's only for people in Canada. We're not going to have snow in a couple more years. Just think. We used to have a ski area on Moscow Mountain, folks.
Yeah, we did. And it went north-south.
You can't remember that, but I remember that. At 4,000 feet, we thought we had a ski area, and now, hello.
Right?
So I believe there has been some modest change in since I was a student here in 1957.
So just to briefly go through kind of what the chart that we put together, it kind of ranged. We got the existing that's 3 feet for exterior landscaping. We saw a few of them, Boise, for example, that did equivalent to setbacks for that area, which in some cases is pretty large, depending upon what zoning district you're in. Probably about the average, it was 5 feet in width, and then some just didn't specify the width that they needed to be. I think when you look at the existing 3 feet, and then you have the distance between that and the sidewalk, you get the equivalent of that 5-6 feet. So I would recommend that we'd stick with the current that we have, 3 feet, just because we have such wide right of ways a lot of the times, and you end up with like I mentioned, 5-6 foot area anyway, if not larger. Looking at the number of plantings right now, we require that 2 foot
Mike,
tall
I have a
shrubs.
question for that.
Yeah.
What we saw, though, is that nobody's planting in that extra couple of feet. It's right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, but they have about the equivalent number of plantings.
Okay.
And so, you end up with the same. It's to provide that buffer between the parking area and the adjacent right of way, and so you still have some room for those same number of plantings to grow in a wider area.
Into the
So you
right
have
of
the
way.
equivalent of.
And
some
you
of
also
those.
have a wider area for rain to infiltrate.
True.
So we have, in that area, 2 foot tall shrubs every 6 feet centered, and then we require the 1 7 foot tall tree for every 10 stalls. But then again, you have some discretion as to where that goes. Looking at those other parking lots, we've seen that they maybe just end up in the island and then none get on the exterior, and so that is one issue that we've kind of identified. Looking at those jurisdictions that we did, a lot of times we'll have shrubs in combination with trees, and then it's usually kind of common 1 tree per 40 lineal feet. We saw 1 tree per 35, 1 tree per 10 spaces. And then some of these had percentage of evergreen. So, looking at particularly the shrubs, a lot of those were evergreen plantings in the Sherry's and Applebee's parking lot, and it's good that you provide that buffer year round instead of just in the summertime with deciduous trees or shrubs. Looking at when the interior landscaping kicks in, so we've got this current standard that's way above all the other ones. So looking at it only would kick in with 50 to 99 parking spaces. That would require division of 2 islands with each being 3 foot wide, and then we go up to 3 with 100 to 199 and 4 with 200 or more. And if you think of a 200 or more parking stall lot and just having 4 islands, it seems pretty minimal. Looking at those other jurisdictions, so probably at the very far end of the spectrum, you had 1 kick in at 6 spaces, which probably is too early to kick in to have a landscape island. Some were 10, some were 12. 12 was about the most common for kicking the internal islands in. And then you had some that were 20 or more. Looking at the frequency, a lot of these coincided. So you had maybe the threshold for interior landscaping was 12 spaces, and then he had one per every 12 stalls within the requirement. Currently, we have none for the frequency. Looking at the research, a lot of them did 1 per 10, 1 per 12, 1 per 15. Some did 1 for every 30 stalls. But the 1 per every 10 to 12 was probably the most common across all those jurisdictions.
And Mike, I just wanted to clarify too, it was the width of the spaces is 8 feet or 7.5 or 7, what is it? So that, because that, I guess it just gives perspective on when you think about one tree for 10 spaces, it's really 70 feet, or is it 80 feet?
Oh, at least 80
The width
feet,
of a
huh?
parking space is
Well, it's 9 feet wide, so I assume
Oh, okay.
like 10 feet wide for a parking spot. So you're looking at probably around 90 feet. So if you had one island for every 10 spaces, it'd be about 90 feet. And then we looked at dimensions, internal dimensions. So we currently have the 3-foot requirement. Really, the range was about 5 to 10 feet in width. We had some that did square footage calculations. So they usually ran the gamut. 24 square feet was common, 30 square feet. But when you end up calculating that out, it comes pretty similar to your standard 6-foot wide by 20 feet deep stall. The current planning requirements within those internal islands usually have a what it currently says is that they'd be adequately landscaped with shrubs, vegetative ground cover, or other landscaping with trees. When looking at the research, most they specify 1.5-inch caliper, so that's pretty universal. We do that in our landscape buffers, so buffers between zones that aren't necessarily parking lots will specify the caliper. Just in the parking lots we don't. And then most require kind of trees as well as shrubs and other vegetative ground cover. Just to look at the internal landscaping percentages, of course we don't have any right now, and some of these range from about 3 to 12% on the high end. You recall those percentages from what we had just looked at, maybe the Boise model is around 6%. We talked about that. Half of them use percentages, the other half use 1 per 12, 1 per 10. I think it's going to be a lot easier for developers and staff and the public to implement if you just do a 1 per 12 instead of calculating the whole percentage of the whole lot. You end up, we can look at kind of an equivalent. So the 1 per 12 comes out to be about the 6%. So if we're, looking that's comfortable with 6%, then we just say the 1 per 12, and it's easy to calculate. Well, you got 24 stalls, then you need 2 islands instead of having to look at the area and calculate the area. It's just a lot easier of a method to do it. So, and then you had kind of the distinction between some of them including the external and internal landscaping. So if you look at like the 12%er, that included external landscaping, so it skews the numbers in the higher range. But if you don't include the external landscaping in some of those same percentages, they get down to about 6 to 8%. So kind of going through, all of this, looking at the external landscaping, I think 3 foot works within that area just because we got the adjacent right-of-way. But I think that maybe something we could do is add, maybe 1 tree per every 40 feet within external landscape buffers. So we have that one, have the 1 tree every 40 on top of the shrubs in those areas.
Why am I, what do you mean 3 feet seems to work? 3 feet of what?
Width. So we have like Sherry's and Applebee's, they've got the 3 external, right? So it's 3 feet on the exterior of the lot, and we've got the shrubs every 6 feet on center.
Yeah.
And then the area between the property and the sidewalk is usually 6 to 10 feet. So that's what I mean by that.
So that's the right of way I was asking about, like who's responsible for landscaping that would
Be the property owner.
property, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
It'd just be like you're responsible
Okay.
for shoveling the sidewalk
Gotcha.
in front of your
Okay.
house type of thing. And then maybe look at inserting a requirement that 50% be evergreen. Internally, these are just questions. This is looking at the research and looking at the diagrams and everything.
If we say 50% evergreen, we probably want to put in a caution about the placement of evergreen trees.
Yeah, why would you say
Yeah.
that? 50% evergreen, is that standard too, or where does that come
Well,
from?
you see it across other jurisdictions, but it's really, the intent is to provide, especially on the exterior, kind of the buff. This is exterior, so
Okay.
we're thinking about the buffering on the surrounding the parking lot from maybe residential or other adjacent uses, and so
Buffers,
you think
yeah.
about deciduous trees or shrubs that end up losing their leaves, in the winter, then you don't have that buffer anymore. So that's why
Right.
a lot of them require at least 50% in order to, stay green year
So
round.
maybe we also add in, I think the concern is just the visibility for turning and stuff, so X number of feet from access points where you would be needing to see. If you're leaving the parking lot and going across that area, you probably don't want an evergreen within X distance. I don't know what that X distance is, but whatever that site distance is.
When you're saying 50% evergreen, it could be a shrub.
Yeah, pretty much.
It could grow at a maximum of 3 feet high. and
mainly
stop.
referring to shrubs.
Shrubs.
That
Oh,
50%
I
has
got
to
you.
be
Okay, I was
evergreen, not
thinking of
necessarily a
conifers.
tree. Yeah.
It seems like that. It almost needs to define that because you're talking about a lot of low-lying evergreen shrubs, which makes a nice
Right.
event, keeping it under your 3 foot. But then if you
More like
think
a
of
Walmart,
evergreen as tree, so I don't know what words we use to.
Yeah, no, I was, we could clarify that, but I was mainly saying, one, maybe canopy tree, and then you have 50% of the shrubs
Okay.
be evergreen.
Okay, I
So,
didn't realize you meant
yeah,
shrubs. Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's where I didn't go.
The 3 foot on the first bullet,
Yeah,
is that the planting strip width?
that's the width, yeah,
3 feet,
yeah.
okay.
Plus
So
the,
Plus the area
Yeah.
between, so that,
Sidewalk.
that would include.
So you're like 9 feet or
So
something.
you end up
Yeah.
being with 9-10 feet because
That's what
you have that
explaining
distance.
earlier, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
understand. Thank you.
And then looking at the internal landscape islands, right now it kicks in at 50. Looking at being more consistent with what everybody else is doing, and some of them kick in at 6, some are 12. I think maybe 20 would be reasonable from what we currently are. And then looking at the around 6%, maybe one island per 12 stalls. Like Boise's requirement seems like a fairly good number for looking at those parking lots with Joseph Street ball fields and then kind of those diagrams.
So I have a question there. So you mean 12 on each side? If you have islands that are doing the ends, it's really 12 between those two islands, not. I don't want to. Never mind.
Yeah, that it would be an island at the end of.
Wouldn't be 12 stalls, like.
So it'd be like
6
this.
and 6 on each side, and then you have an island, and then it would be really 24 stalls on
Yeah.
both sides. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you had a single row, like over
Yeah,
here.
okay.
So this is what we mean. So you'd have
Okay,
an
gotcha.
this island, then you'd have 12, then an island.
Okay.
Where you had the double, you'd have. These are pretty much 2 islands, even though they're 1 island. type of
Okay.
thing.
That's not an island. That's so less than 12, an island per 12, isn't it? I mean, you get one island, one. In theory, there'd be four, if it was for every 12 spaces, you'd have 4 islands, wouldn't you?
That's what I was confused about, and it's really.
And
No, you just have to look at one side. So there's 12 there, and then there's an island there, and an island there.
So 12 spaces in a row.
So if you were just
Linear spaces, yeah.
if you were just imagining the parking lot like only this bay right here, you'd have 12, and then you have an island. You'd have 12, then you have an island.
No, here you just have double islands.
But my point is that there's an island at the end,
At
so
each end.
that gives us a little, but I see. Duh.
The wording will be tricky.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. 'cause you can-
But it seems to me that, you could, I was thinking about just a grouping of parking, not just calling it out in a linear way. I would hope that the guideline then could be manipulated by the owner so that it fits his or her requirements.
Well, yeah, if you had an L-shaped lot or a U-shaped lot or something, you might end up with a different configuration than that. And
Yeah.
so then how do we address that? Because you wouldn't,
Well, that
I guess-
motel is a prime example. They've done it, haven't they? And they've got parking on both sides of theirs, and they have a few islands. If you have enough spaces, and if you have 12 spaces on the side, on the L shape, then you'd make an island. If not, then you wouldn't, right?
Yeah, I think we want to have some type of flexibility in there for circumstances that
Exactly.
would, I mean, if you look at the University Crossing parking lot, technically, I think this is 13 stalls here.
But then they have a nice.
They have an island
yeah.
there, but,
Yeah.
if we were to go by the word of the law and said that you had to have one every 12 stalls, well, you'd be putting one, right here, whereas it works well that you have one here and you've got one here. They use this one for bicycle parking.
This is really an unusual development, and I'm charmed by the fact, as you drive around America, every little business has its parking lot, and you can't go from this parking lot to the other one so often. And I was really charmed by the fact that you can kind of get in and out of this one in a kind of an unusual way.
Yeah, you could go check out each part of the parking lot without getting out of your car, right? Of all the addresses that you gave us. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really a highly unusual development just because of the hill behind it and the way that you wouldn't have thought that land would ever be used for a motel, would you? And yet it did.
Yeah, it works good.
Yeah, it seems
Mike,
to.
what was the width of the internal islands on the ball field?
I believe that was 8 feet.
Is there a reason why we shouldn't do 8 feet?
No, I was just putting out a number. 6 was kind of a standard one we saw with other jurisdictions, but it's whatever the commission, after reviewing that and talking to David, if you.
Yeah, that's the guy right
I
there.
would promote the 8 feet if that's doable, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, because you lose a foot with curbs. And,
Well, and then we need to define how that's measured. Some
Yeah,
places end up saying from inside a curb to
Oh,
inside
okay.
a curb. Some
Gotcha.
say exterior to
gotcha.
exterior.
And if you say 8 foot wide, you're going to have to say long too, aren't you? How long it has to be or something.
Usually, length equal to adjacent stall is
yeah, that one
typical.
seems reasonable.
So, we'd say whatever the width comes out to be, whatever the length of the adjacent stall is. And then usually you'd specify, one would have to specify the 1.5 inch caliper tree of a certain height, and then the combination of shrubs and ground cover within each island.
Calipers measured 6 inches above ground,
Thank you.
1.5 inch diameter. And then back up again to the 50% evergreen, with that planting space wide, then 3 feet plus maybe 6, right? So evergreen trees could be appropriate for that as well as shrubs, because if there's no vision obstruction issue going on with the, I was just working it within my head here on how that would fit in. And trying to
Yeah, I mean,
describe the terminology.
Yeah.
Evergreen would, maybe just leave it at that.
40-year-old Douglas fir is wider than 6 feet.
Yeah,
At least mine are.
Species, that would be not on the species list. The evergreen, the Douglas fir.
So unless anybody else has any other, things to add? or-
Should there be, something about limits on heights of shrubbery?
Yeah, I think that, some jurisdictions have arboricultural specifications that they point to. I know we have, various manuals that the Tree Commission and Urban Forester, Parks and Rec puts out. But I'd have to do a little bit more research as to what those contain. Usually it's some direction as to, a certain number of plantings. I know the Tree Commission's been working on kind of whittling down that larger list of trees that are native and do well in the area to, trees that would be more appropriate when you have power lines above, tree lawn,
Right.
street trees.
I'm referring to the shrubbery.
Yeah.
And David,
Well, and
you
that-
were suggesting 36 inches? Or?
Right. The intersections of the city of Moscow that follow a code that
3 feet.
a site triangle 40 feet by 40 feet, and then intersect to that, those two endpoints on each corner, where theoretically you shouldn't have anything taller than 36 inches, be it a fence, shrubbery, those kinds of things. Trees are disallowed actually in that side triangle unless they're already growing there, then they're grandfathered in, the older trees. So, yes, I think maybe some wording about when you're driving through the parking lot and you need site clearance around this island or that island, coming in, going out of the lot, circumventing through the lot, some type of wording to say, you need some clearance, and that
It has
clearance,
to be
you can't
maintained
have
at less
anything
than
higher
36
than
inches.
36 inches in height, the mature shrub, and that's important to say, somehow.
Where the ones on the periphery might
Something-
be able to go 5 feet.
Could-
It wouldn't
that's
matter.
right.
So-
Ball out there.
Yeah,
Could
so
be
you
short.
wouldn't
Might
really
want
want
to
to
say
limit it.
interior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the egress, the entrances.
Is there any?
Stop and looking,
Right.
to pull out into the street,
Right.
you're going to be looking left and right, and most likely you'll be some landscaping on either side. You need to have some clearance to see it.
Is there a problem with the difference between a natural shrub that stays under 3 feet versus a more exuberant one, which has to be maintained at under 3 feet?
Difference, well, it requires maintenance, and if
Required
maintenance is
maintenance.
lacking, then you have a safety issue.
Yeah.
And so that would be, the difference. But reference material lists these shrubs or cultivars grown in nurseries, sold in retail, that list size, width, and height at maturity. So the designer needs to follow some kind of guidelines on not planting a 6-foot shrub on the corner.
Well, we could specify.
A shrub that grows to 6 feet.
You could specify a maximum height.
Not to be confused with what's planted at the moment,
Yeah.
From the pot, take it out of the pot, it's only a foot high, well, that's not 6 feet, but it may grow to 6 feet later.
So I have a question at this point, Mike. Several people who couldn't make the meeting tonight wanted to be part of this discussion at the next meeting. So what would be a logical carryover of this discussion, respecting the fact that Dave, gave his night to us tonight, and they're just going to have to read the minutes or something to catch
Well,
up.
you can go back and watch the video.
Yeah, oh, true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be the best thing to do. I mean, I was planning on already kind of carrying this over. Maybe we could do a draft ordinance to see what it looked like type of thing. And so we could talk about it at the next meeting, but it'd be helpful to have everybody that couldn't make it watch the video.
Okay, that's a
And
good.
it's posted right after the meeting,
Great.
so it'll be up there.
Great, okay. That sounds good. So are we pretty much, Dave, thank you so
Good,
much
yeah,
for your
thanks very
time
much.
and for your information. It was really helpful.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
I appreciate
So-
that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So, we move on to the next item on the agenda, I guess, which is portable science discussion. And Mike, do you have?
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. So this is in regards to a letter we received from Brandon Mitchell. Brandon's here to answer any questions that you might have about, I think what he referred to as feather signs. We got a letter included in your packet, and I think it brought it up at the last meeting, and Commission wanted to take a look at maybe including those in our zoning code, our sign code. So I've done a little bit of research on them to familiarize myself with them as well. And this is your typical type of banner sign, usually made of some type of fabric, vinyl material. Comes in a wide variety of sizes and shapes. Can be stuck in the ground. Sometimes they're sitting on kind of a four prong stand. A lot of companies sell these, and they're all a little bit different shapes. You have ones that are more of a teardrop, one of a razor, some rectangular, some feather, some of a kind of a saber shape, and they all have optional heights that you can go with on these. Some of the ones around town that you've seen pop up, they're typically kind of a portable sign. A lot of the other jurisdictions I've looked at call them banner signs, even though they're not a typical banner. They're usually of some type of similar banner material, but they're freestanding and portable. This is out on Pullman Road. And then I've got Brandon's development here, Jiffy Lube. They had a couple of the feather signs out on display, as well as the car wash right next door. Right there on the corner. So I had looked at about the same jurisdictions that we had gone over for the off-street parking. Looked at Boise, Caldwell, Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, Meridian, Missoula, Nampa, Pullman, Sandpoint, and Twin Falls. Like I mentioned, they're usually called banner signs within their codes, although some of them called them temporary sign displays. Some call them portable signs, although we call them A-frames, portable signs within our code. Sandwich boards. Some call them wind device signs, which was unique. I think that may have been Twin Falls that called them that. Then you usually have a standard definition. Within our sign code, we go through and define all types of signs. So they'll usually have a banner sign definition. It's something similar to what I have here, sign made of cloth, canvas, plastic, or any flexible material intended to kind of move freely in the wind, with or without a frame or other supporting structure, used for the purpose of advertising or drawing attention to business, commodity, service, sale, or product. So if we were going to include that, we'd put a definition in the code. And then a lot of the common considerations are maybe the size, height, and number of signs that are allowed on site. Looking at the size, it kind of varied from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The minimum was 5, and it ranged up until about 32 square feet in size. Some of them didn't have a specified limit, so there was no maximum size limitation that they had listed in their code. Looking at the height, you had a lot of 6-foot height, 8-foot height, and then you had some that were like the max height of the zone. So if you're thinking of a commercial zone, 60 feet tall is. I don't think Motor Business lists a maximum height. So it's. I don't think you need to go with a maximum height for the zone. You could probably have some quantitative number. And then some had no maximum specified for the height. Looking at the numbers, they had anywhere from one per business. If you had maybe just one tenant or one business on the site, they had one per 50 lineal feet, and then some just had no limit. They would allow as many as you wanted to put up. Coeur d'Alene was probably the one that got a little more detailed. They said that if it's greater than 9 square feet in size, you get one every 40 lineal feet. If it's less than 9 square feet, then you get one per 20 lineal feet. So if it's a little bit less in size, you get the spacing a little bit closer together than if it was greater than 9. Other considerations are duration, and some just had specific requirements. Most had no limit. Some list them as temporary signs, but yet they don't have any limit to them. So it's hard to call that a temporary sign. Usually temporary signs are ones that come up and then go down. I guess temporarily during the day and then comes down at night. Some required or only allowed 2 consecutive weeks, 2 times a year. Those were the ones that were more restrictive. We had 3 30-day consecutive periods separated by 30 days. And then others had special requirements. A lot of them said that it has to be professionally prepared or maintained in a neat, clean, repaired condition. You can't have any signs that are tattered, torn, or in disrepair. Some had setback requirements, so you had to meet maybe the setback of the zone or the setback of the freestanding sign that's allowed on site, so maybe it's 10 feet from the road right away. Some didn't require a sign permit to install one of those or to fly one. A lot of them require or allowed no illumination, which is pretty common. Even our A-frame sidewalks, sandwich board signs don't allow any type of illumination. And then it has to be set back to the freestanding sign setback, and then it must get a freestanding sign permit. So it was all kind of across the board on the special requirements. What I guess Brandon had proposed in his letter was that the sign should not exceed 13 feet, and that's with the pole attached to it. It has to be in a good state of repair. 1 sign per 30 feet of frontage with a maximum of 3 signs per lot. And then I don't think you had a recommendation for square footage, but that would be something to consider. Is there going to be a maximum square footage of these? And then if the commission should direct staff to prepare an ordinance to amend the sign code, we'd probably include the definition, maybe be freestanding banner, address the size and the height, the number of allowed, probably include the statement about has to be in a state of good repair, and anything else that you can think of. But that was pretty much what I had found in the research, and Brandon's proposal seemed to be fairly middle of the road as far as all the other regulations. Some of them were more stringent, some of them were more lenient. So I certainly invite him up if he has any questions or.
Whatever questions you want to ask. I mean, I have all the answers, but that's fine.
Well, I have a question for you, like the vapor signs that you've seen right there. There's like 20 businesses in that mall.
Yeah. Well, like 6 or 7.
Well, yes.
Yeah. I
20 was a little
I get what
bit.
you're saying. Yeah, I hear you.
So what's going to happen if they all want 3
Mm-hmm.
banners flying out there?
Well, that was kind of the issue we ran into with the sidewalk signs, the A-frame signs, was that you were allowed as many as you wanted to. If you displayed them inside the mall, you were allowed. We pretty much didn't regulate them. But if they were out here on the frontage, I believe we limited it to 1, and it was kind of the thing where it was whoever came and got one first had, got to display it type of thing. And so that would be something we'd have to consider is it 1 per business when you have some type of, when you're in that type of strip mall? Is it 1 per business, or is it, everybody gets to display 2, 3? Is it that you still have the requirement that it's, you can have 1 every certain, amount of certain distance? Looking at one of these, I think they had And I have I should have handed out this earlier, but I kind of put together this matrix of the requirements.
And the sandwich board signs now, is there a requirement on the square footage of them?
Yeah, they're 3 by 4. Yeah.
So that's good.
So the signs on the property of the strip mall, but the tenants don't maintain that property?
Well, I would imagine that whoever the owner is of the strip mall maintains the landscape area in front of it.
And so that owner is designated, like, they're okay with the signs?
That's between them and the,
Right,
yeah, it's
so
between the owner
they
and the
didn't
tenants.
ask you to put them out?
Usually they come and get a sign permit with the city.
And so and so if they have any kind of rental agreement, then that goes in with them and stuff, but there's nothing.
Yeah, it's usually owner or agent of the business. In the strip mall circumstance, they would just be the agent, on behalf of the owner. Maybe they own the business. It could be a whole bunch of different scenarios.
Yeah.
A lot of times they condominiumize the units, and so you actually have owners of the, each space, and so, that would be the challenge, is to, equitably, what would you allow?
Well,
for
it seems like
signage?
there's a way to do that, possibly if we only allowed a certain spacing and only allowed a certain number along a lot line, no matter how long the lot line is, every 30, 40 feet. And we also put a duration on it, and then there would be a rotation in the people in the strip mall to work it out. I worry about not having a duration because I've looked, ever since this issue was raised, I've been looking at them in other places like crazy, and they get faded and people don't maintain them. And I don't know, I think it becomes an enforcement issue for the city. When something's been out there in the sun bleaching out, they look terrible. And so how do you control that? I think having some duration limit is a way to some degree, but also that might help strip malls, work it out among the tenants, if we're going to allow this. I think we need to go there in terms of not allowing just a whole bunch of them and making sure that they're only spaced no more within a certain number of linear feet. So if somebody has a 100-foot property line, and it's every 40 feet or something, they get 2 or whatever, whatever the spacing is. So.
Could we have different requirements for strip malls and then private businesses like Brandon's? Strip malls like that. You just have the grass along the side. It becomes complicated, and that's what I think we're kind of arguing over here in the discussion, is trying to figure out a way to solve the problems of a strip mall as opposed to just allowing a business owner to kind of do his own, a lot. Yeah.
I think I thought that I put it in my letter, but I may not have. But as I was looking through the code, because I read through the entire code.
We got it just recorded, so we got it.
My voice is shot anyway. But as I was looking through the code, I've noticed that there's different rules for different zoning areas.
Yeah.
So you've got like your motor area that's considered a zone, and then you've got maybe a shopping mall type zone, and that might be something to work with as far as that goes. That would solve the problem of too many people trying to put too many signs out at the same time.
Yeah, if you look, I think Nampa, if you look at this matrix here, Nampa's the only one that seems to have addressed that. So what they do is 1 sign per business, and then if there's a single tenant business, they may have 1 per 50 lineal feet of property frontage. So that would give, in this circumstance, maybe you have 6 tenants within the Renaissance strip mall there, and so it would allow each of them to have 1 sign out there. But if it was just like, for instance, Brandon's business, he would just be able to have 1 per 50 lineal feet. So if you had 100 feet of frontage, you'd be able to have 2 type of thing. So that is what, that's why, I'm sure that's why they have written it that way, is to address kind of the strip.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you have the sandwich boards now?
Yeah, it is. I can.
I know there's 12 square footage for sandwich boards, but I didn't know how many per linear feet or,
I thought sandwich boards were in the commercial district primarily.
They are, yeah.
well, yeah, that's kind of what they,
So do you think these
And that
help you
has-
advertise?
I think they do, yeah.
You really do?
well, sure they do. They flop, yeah.
Well, it's funny because driving through
I mean, Jiffy
Tri-Cities
Lube.
and
How
along,
many Jiffy Lubes are there in town?
Yeah, but there's more,
I don't think so.
Right.
more
we've
than
got-
just Jiffy Lube that.
Right, we've got more than just Jiffy Lube, but also my Jiffy Lube in Moscow is set back behind the car wash and CDs, and so it draws attention to where I'm actually located, because I often have customers call up and say, where are you at? And I have to tell them I'm across from the specialist. They go, oh, okay, I know right where that's at. And so I think that they grab that attention. I've been doing this business for years and years and years, and we've used them in Tri-Cities. They were very effective in Tri-Cities when I ran the 10 stores there. So
No, I think they're pretty effective. We're just trying to see how many we want flopping around out
Right.
there from each business,
agree.
you know.
and when it gets windy, you don't even see what they're saying. I mean, driving back from Portland this weekend, I mean, going up through Tri-Cities, up the Columbia River, I mean, they were just flapping like crazy, and,
Right,
and
so
it was kind of annoying,
But I would think
And-
we could do something like the sandwich board, just the same kind of
Yeah.
regs that you have
It's
on that.
temporary.
I mean,
Yeah.
like with flags, the flapping in the wind tends to deteriorate stuff,
Yeah,
and you just, I guess I'm really struggling with the issue of hundreds of these things. Do we care about our strip streets, or do we not care? Do we care whether, in other words, we've talked about signage, and we've allowed, of course, our signs, and of course we now have digital signs. It's sort of reminiscent to me of the days, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, when every business in the state of Idaho had a reader board before digital stuff, and you put letters on them. Do you remember those?
I do.
Did you have one?
I never have. No.
Well, it was a fad, admittedly. It came and went. They were ugly. The letters would blow off. They were
Hard to
they were on
change.
little wheels, and you could drive it around and park it in front. And so everybody wanted one. They came through like the Tin Man, and everybody was going to have one. I just worry about how much stuff to have on our highways before, okay, everybody's got a flag flying in front of their place. How different is that from just the signs that you've got, the lovely signs that you already have? In other words,
Stationary
it looks
signs,
to
yeah.
me like the car wash is already trying to block you out by putting up some.
I own the car wash.
He
You own
owns
the
a car
car.
wash.
I own them both.
So you want your car wash signs to be in front of your Jiffy Lube sign?
Well, no, because when you come around that corner, when you come down that road, you can see them pretty plain that they stand out. And that's why I use a red one and a white one. And I change my signs out about every 3 or 4 months. I'm always changing them out to get new ones in there because I don't want them to look all ragged and tattered and stuff.
I guess and it's just hard for me because I don't run Jiffy Lube, so I have to listen to your thoughts. But I'd prefer, in my own mind, to have a time limit that, in other words, it seems to make sense to me. You have a sale, there's a time you want to do. It's springtime time to wash your car. Let's put it out for 30
Yeah, but not
days.
permanently sitting
and
there
then,
all the time.
And then have them go away
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are Mother's Day and there's Valentine's Day. And so I can imagine those special things like we do for sales. But to have them every day, 365 days a year, after a while, isn't everybody just going to glaze over?
Well, and I think that you sound like you're responsible in keeping yours up, but I've just seen so many out there where the business owner doesn't, and it really doesn't give a good image for the community. It's a lot of faded banners
Right.
just flopping around that are torn and not, and mostly faded, the sun hitting them so badly. So I guess, I couldn't support anything that didn't have a pretty strict time limit on it, personally. I mean, some duration if, where we have to pull them in, and maybe, I guess I'm kind of aligned with Nels, maybe for promotional events or something. I don't know, but.
Let's see, we do one big promotion a year. That's the only time that we do anything, and that's for our Customer Appreciation Weekend.
Yeah.
And, I just, in Tri-Cities, they run banners all the time too, which they allow. I'm not the big banner type person because I think that those get so hammered and so trashed.
And then you
They
get
look
those things
horrible.
that are like inflated tubes that go over like that and go over like this, and in the wind they go like this. So I don't know.
I just know these flags have really helped out my business and everywhere that I've ever worked with it. And whenever business is doing good, it's good for the city. And so I'm just looking for ways that we can actually do something that's good for the A-frames. Look, in my opinion, for my area, would look horrible. If it's downtown, obviously you don't want these flags all over downtown because people are walking up and down the sidewalks. And the A-frames work good for that because they're right outside the
You're
business
talking about
door.
the sandwich boards.
Yeah, the sandwich boards.
Yeah, we
Where I'm at, they just, in my opinion, those sandwich boards just look horrible. They look worse.
But see,
than
they
flags.
present a problem too, because I know my husband owns a building on Main Street. It has a lot of tenants in it, and a lot of them want to have sandwich boards out on the street. Well, you can only have X number, and that's regulated, So it's like, how do you work through that when you have a lot of property owners along a strip or anything else? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, they used to just be allowed downtown, the A-frame signs, and then we kind of went through something similar to this, 6-7 years ago, where people wanted to put them out on like the highway corridors, and so we ended up changing the regulations at that time, and they're a little bit more lenient for downtown, but they're pretty standard for downtown and along these commercial corridors. But for downtown, we just allow one portable sign for each 100 feet of building frontage.
which means when you have 10 tenants,
Yeah. It says at least one portable sign shall be permitted for each building. So that's the challenge, is that you have people that maybe don't have the ground floor frontage and they have an office upstairs and they want to direct people up the stairs to the office, and then it's it puts us in a bit of a bad place just because it's
and it does clutter the sidewalk
first
when
come
you have
first serve
pedestrians.
type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's trying to get them to maybe share a sign and both advertise for it.
I apologize for the interruption. I have to go take care of something. Would you mind excusing me?
Oh,
for the balance
please
of the
go
meeting?
do what you need to do.
We don't have any other.
We've had a late
quorum
meeting.
issues. Yeah, I apologize.
So
yeah.
Well, Mike, are we going to cover the nonconformities discussion?
Well, we
tonight?
can
Do you
put
wanna
that off
defer-
till next meeting.
Defer, I would
Yeah,
suggest
we could do
deferring
that.
it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
So
apologize.
no, thank you, Rob.
Okay.
Thank you for coming because we know. Yeah.
Thank you.
The portable signs in like general business or motor business, so on these corridors, it's pretty similar, but it just says that one portable sign is allowed for each 100 square feet of lot frontage, or 100 feet of lot frontage. At least one portable sign shall be allowed per each lot frontage. No more than 3 portable signs shall be permitted for any single lot frontage. And then you have requirements 3 times.
So that's that's covering the sandwich boards. Right now, but
that's
that
what our
could
sandwich.
reflect into this.
That's what our sandwich board
Yeah,
regulations
yeah.
are.
And how long are they allowed to leave them out there?
During the business day. So
Okay, so
they're
they have to
required to
come
put
in
them in
at
at night, but similar to probably Brandon's, he probably takes them in. I don't know if these go in at night or not, but
They can be
Ours
out.
except for the car wash.
yeah.
Car
Well,
wash.
see, that's what I'm saying. Can't we just slide the flag into that paragraph and add it to that? And have one per 100 feet, whatever the sandwich board is?
Yeah, I mean, we can do whatever you guys want to do.
I mean, I just think that's if we already have a rule in there for sidewalk
I agree with you. If
advertising.
we're going to allow it, that would be, in my opinion, also.
And they're
probably
about
a
the same
logical
amount.
way
There
to
might
do
be a
it.
little bit more square footage on the flags than there is that you're allowing on the sandwich board. 12 compared to, I don't know how wide they are, but
So
they're
are they
11
allowed to
feet.
have
They're about
both?
yay wide.
Yeah, so they're about 11, 12 feet tall too, as far as square footage. They're about the same square footage as far as surface space.
So it would be either or,
Just
right?
tall instead
You wouldn't
of wide.
allow both.
Yeah, I think it would be
yeah,
either or.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, either or.
I don't know, I have some reservations, I know Nels does, but I can see, I don't know how the rest of you feel. I guess we're kind of a small commission tonight.
Well, I think if we put it in there with the sandwich board, I don't see why any of us would have any problem with that, but maybe we still do. It's going to be taller instead of wider, is what I'm seeing is the only difference.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I think they're both, we call a sandwich board a portable sign, so I think they're, you could make a statement to say that they're both portable signs. But then these wouldn't fit within the maximum height of 4 feet or 3 feet wide.
Are we seeing sandwich boards out on the highway now? I guess I've only lived here for 30 or 40 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know where Jiffy Lube is, and I know I don't even have to ask. But
I've gone to your business for almost 30 years, and I've never depended on a sign to get me there, I'll tell you that. And both aspects of it. So I have an aversion to so much clutter on the strip, the strip, that everything's trying to outshout everything else.
Yeah.
And you just kind of tune it all out is what happens. So
I can drive those streets without noticing signs at all.
Me too. I mean, except for when Tri-State.
And I've lived here for 50
sign.
years.
When Tri-State put up their dynamic sign, it almost caused a lot of traffic accidents until people got used to it. But,
Noticed that, didn't you? For a while.
One of the things that I found, though, that's unique about Moscow that isn't unique about Tri-Cities is that college kids are always moving. So we've always got new people coming in, and that's why drawing attention is so important. People that have been here for years know where it's at, but these new people that are coming in,
Right.
you
Yeah,
have to see
fair
it.
enough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
is
with the
there a
student
duration
population, you're
limit
thinking.
on the, I know you said they have to come in at night, but is there a duration limit of any kind in our ordinance for sandwich signs?
No.
No, you just
Just
can't.
as long as you pull them in every night.
So what we can't, is there any kind of maintenance requirement that they look well maintained? Because
Well,
this is a problem with the type of sign you're proposing.
Well, and sandwich board's
Yeah.
the same thing if they're out in the sun, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we have a statement that says materials shall be solid and durable and that there be no lighting. I mean, we can easily insert a statement in
How
there.
long do you think one of these, the fabric ones, how long do you think they last?
I've seen them last probably 7-8 months, but I usually change mine every 3 to 4.
Then you strip the flag off and
Just
put
pull
it
the
in
flag
there.
off the pole and put a new one back on. It costs me, I don't know, $150 each time I do it.
Notice if it makes a difference seasonally.
No, I haven't really noticed a big difference though. I know we're up in cars and I'm happy about that, so. So,
Well,
That's good.
What's our process here for this? I'm not as, even though you've said things in your letter, I have a hard time being swayed by it, but you're the business guy, and so I do appreciate that. I just the thing that I don't know about, I need to think on it a little bit more. I hadn't even realized anybody was putting up A-frame signs on the highway. I guess I haven't paid any attention. It seems to me like the A-frames downtown is a whole nother thing. As you're walking down the sidewalk and you bump into it, you see it.
That's his argument. The flags will work better out there on the.
Hmm.
And that's why I said just slide them in the paragraph there with the sandwich boards and.
Well, I think that if the direction you want to go is to allow either or, then we can just, insert it such that I don't know if we'd call it a portable sign, because we'd have to go through and define maybe a maximum height of these, because they're a lot taller than 4. So
Yeah.
maybe we'd have to go through a maximum height and a maximum size that's
Or maximum
maybe
square footage. Yeah.
So we could have, it structured so that maybe we say a freestanding banner or, some type of, we wanted to cover maybe things that don't look like a feather, the
Yeah, maybe
teardrop
add a
or
little bit
things
more
like
square
that.
footage just to be safe.
And just say that, in each district, you're allowed one portable sign or one freestanding banner. And we could cover it that way.
Well, I'm wondering, since there are a number of commissioners who aren't here tonight, who will probably be at the next meeting, that maybe you could come forward, not so much that we direct you to say, yes, let's go ahead with this, but that you show us a way that it could be done that for the purposes of discussion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question I have, I'm not sure I want to see the banner signs in downtown. So, and I guess that could still be handled.
Yeah,
either or in motor business and only
That's a
sandwich
good
boards
point. Not to have them
downtown.
downtown, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
the way our code's structured is that we list all the different types of signs underneath each zone. So we
Yeah.
Propose which zones it
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah.
So we
Brandon,
could,
Yeah.
do you see it as an auto area?
The big things I see is automotive and apartments. Those are the two big that I see using those type of
Apartments.
on the corners of apartment buildings and stuff. I've seen that a lot in different
like
cities.
now leasing.
Well, that
type
I would
signs.
think would need a duration because it's really, we're such a semester driven, I mean, we own a lot of rental property, mostly in Pullman, but it's, it's June and when they sign leases and it's,
Yeah, it is.
yeah,
Right now,
no, really,
go
if
to-
you haven't signed a lease in June, you're probably not going to have a place to live next year unless WSU decides to drop 5,000 students or something. But, and so I think that one really would need to have a limit on it. It just, I don't know.
So could we
Yeah.
deal with, in, at least, I go to Palouse Properties, and right now, this month is a terrible time to go to Palouse Properties, because the kids are all getting ready to leave, and they want to get cemented whatever they're going to do for next year.
Right.
So there's a line at the door right now, but
Right.
what would happen for the transit population? What if we could make a sort of a time line that, 4 months out of the year or something, so that when new students come to town and stuff, when that transition happens, you really throw out the hello sign, and then it isn't there 365 days a year. Would you entertain something like that?
Well, I don't have a choice. I mean, I'm here pleading my case, and then so you guys obviously have to make the
Sure,
decision.
but we would like to support our businesses
Right,
and things
absolutely.
we like.
Absolutely.
And so we want to do that, but on the other hand, we also are responsible to make our town as livable and as, may I say, beautiful as possible.
Well, and
Totally agree.
when we start to get into the apartment residential areas of the code, I have a real problem because we have single-family houses, duplexes, neighborhoods, people who live here 12 months a year and don't want to see student leases advertised constantly in their face. So I would have a real problem personally with that.
That falls into
Yeah.
where you put it on the zone.
Yeah,
And the
right,
zoning,
right.
and I agree with that.
Right, right.
And I like the no flags downtown because there used to be only sandwich boards downtown and nowhere else, right? So we can do that and just not have them downtown.
Yeah, the only reason I brought up apartments
Right.
is because in Tri-Cities it's really bad.
Right, and that's a different market.
Right,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so you can change that as far as
Right.
the zones go.
Right.
I just know that it helps my business out, and like I said, businesses, as I drive down Troy Highway, I look at it, I've gotten to the point where I want to go down and start planting flowers, because there's so many of these old buildings that just don't look real good, especially where I'm at. You look at CD's Smoke Pit, I love eating there, I love their food, I love the people there, because I talk to them all the time, but the building just doesn't look business oriented. You've got across the street where they're tearing apart they're finally tearing apart where that photography place is. That one just doesn't look the look either. So I struggle with that whole area. I want it to look good. My whole goal is to make sure that Moscow looks good, because it helps my business out right there in that area. That's why I've done what I've done with the car wash and changing the look, and I'm always maintaining things. I'm painting the store, and because that's how I look. And as I drive around, I see the flags look so much better than those A-frames do in that type of an area.
Well, I guess if you could come back with some, some ideas, and the rest of us can look at look at them. I mean, your letter sparked me when I've been traveling over the last couple of weeks to look at look for those in Coeur d'Alene and other communities and Tri-Cities too, where they allow them, and just kind of see what the impact is. Of course, it was a major windstorm and they looked horrible because they were just going like this to the point. And we do get wind certain times a year where that's an issue.
Right, and we don't put them out like Pullman, my Pullman store. They get tons of wind. So there's times they'll put those flags out, and those flags are bending over, and I'm saying, no, bring them in for that.
Right.
Bring them in for the day.
Yeah, if it's something like that. But
And sandwich boards the same way. I mean, they'll
when you get that mellow wind, those flags just kind of do this, and it just looks so good and draws attention to business.
Right. Well, thank you for coming.
Even the
and-
gas station in Deary has banners.
Oh, do they?
I noticed.
Oh, you remember your gas stations used to have those
Actually, I live right
string
on Georgia
flag
Street,
things
so
like
I know a lot about the park.
I forgot
baseball
about
park,
that.
yeah?
Yeah.
And the lights.
They do have lights.
All right, so are we done for tonight, you think?
Yeah, we can table the nonconformities to carry that over to the
What,
next meeting.
could you just give us a hint on, I somehow missed the boat on what you mean by nonconformity discussion, just so we know what it is.
So we have
I mean, I know what
Yeah, we have a nonconformity section of our code, and it covers aspects. So remember a couple years ago, maybe more than a few, we had the lot of record non-conforming lots discussion.
Yeah.
That was up on
Right.
Residence Street, where you had a number
Oh,
hidden
oh,
lanes.
gotcha. I
You had
remember
a
it.
number
Yep.
of lots that
Yep,
were
yep.
adjacent to alleys.
I see.
And
Yeah,
so our
what you
code
mean,
was
yeah.
saying that you couldn't develop those at all, type
Yeah,
of thing. So
yeah.
it's a section that covers that. So there's non-conforming lots, you've got non-conforming structures. So if you have a structure that, well, maybe the current zone requires a 10-foot setback, but it was built at a time where the zoning code didn't have a setback, and so all of a sudden you've got a non-conforming structure because it doesn't meet the current front setback requirement. Well, we've got like some pretty specific restrictions on what you can and can't do with those types of structures that are pretty draconian,
Okay.
compared to what other people are doing. And then as uses as well, and so one of the big issues is non-conforming uses where you have maybe a duplex or a triplex in a single-family zone.
And it burns it down, and then
and they
the
can't
people
rebuild it.
so they can't get
and
insurance.
So they can't
to
get
begin with.
insurance.
Yeah.
They can't get a loan.
Right.
And that's been going on for years here, and it really they didn't really pay attention to it before 2008. But when we had the housing collapse
Right.
at that point in time, all of a sudden now every time you go through and get a loan, banks want the assurance that they're going to be able to rebuild.
Right.
Rightly so. If they land on a duplex and they can only build a single family, well, they're going to take a loss on that, so they don't want to lend.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of been an issue over the last few years, and so we had taken a look at some other jurisdictions, and they're all pretty lenient, and they allow in some circumstances for those to be rebuilt. And so there's just been issues that we've been dealing with that I wanted to see if the commission wanted to take a look at.
I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we need an energized commission, and it's not.
Yeah, no, I figured I'd put you to sleep at this point.
No,
so.
you would. Well, I don't want to stop it if other people want, but I was thinking we
No,
should.
we can
Yeah,
carry
yeah,
it
yeah.
over
We've
next
well, it sounds good.
Well,
Well,
thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, meeting adjourned, I guess. Thank you.